Our final speaker tonight is Professor Damien Kingsbury, a journalist turned academic, the most esteemed, even regal of career paths, let me say. And it's appropriate that looking over his shoulder tonight, Damien Kingsbury will have the relatively stern visage of Alfred Deakin. He is an Alfred Deakin Professor attached to the School of International and Political Studies. Will you please welcome Professor Damien Kingsbury.
Thank you very much, Warwick. I should point out that the earlier references to Jacobean are not entirely correct. As you probably are aware, Jacobeans were supporters of King James I and were part of a plot to blow up Parliament. I'm not of that ilk. I'm actually a Jacobite, which is a different breed of animal altogether. Jacobites were those members of the Jacobite Club in Paris whose principal purpose was to get rid of the monarchy. And they did so by cutting off the heads of the King and Queen. I was going to go down that path, but I thought it was a bit violent and bloody, and so I've decided on a different tack, okay? So if you'll bear with me. I should point out that my name does not imply an imprimatur for the monarchy, which, according to noted Englishman Christopher Hitchens, is Britain's favourite fetish. Kingsbury just happens to be the moniker of a village in Somerset with an old church, 3 pubs and an ancient lockup. And speaking of prisons, if I'm about to commit lèse majesté, it's worth remembering that until towards the end of the 19th century, speaking poorly of the monarchy would have had me charged with treason and duly hung, eviscerated and chopped into small pieces, which, depending on your perspective, might have been an improvement. The current monarch is known to you as Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Mountbatten Windsor, Elizabeth II. She is known as Brenda to the readers of the magazine Private Eye, Lilibet as a child, Gertie to her friends and Cabbage to her husband. The Queen was born in 1926 and acceded to the throne on February the 6th, 1952 on the death of her father, George VI. That's right. She has spent 58 years on the throne and was Queen before 2 of the 3 most recent British Prime Ministers were even born. This seems to confirm Malcolm Muggeridge's observation that a ready means of being cherished by the English is to adopt the simple expedient of living a long time. It's therefore useful that the English instinctively admire any person who has no talent and who is modest about it. Indeed, the English like to think that incompetence is the same thing as sincerity. In the defining Australian text, The Lucky Country, Donald Horne identified Australian culture as broadly egalitarian and reflecting an element of a fair go. As good Australians, we therefore fondly embrace the hereditary class-based British royal family and the Queen as the Australian head of state. From the Queen's own official website, quote, "In all her duties, she speaks and acts as Queen of Australia and not as Queen of the United Kingdom. And lest we be any doubt about it, the Australian oath of allegiance is to the Queen and her successors. I, ... do swear that I will faithfully and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen ... because it changes, her heirs and successors according to law, so help me God." And that last bit would appear to rule out all us atheists and devil worshippers. The royal heirs and successors seem to get our allegiance, except, of course, where they've been assassinated by royal rivals or retired to scandalously marry American divorcees. Otherwise, we would still be swearing allegiance to the descendants of the murderous 10th century Athelstan, the first ruler of what we now know of as England. Once upon a time, people were indeed willing to kill to become a king or queen, and often did. They were the Rottweilers of authoritarian politics. After several generations of inbreeding, however, all we're left with is the corgis. And on the subject of corgis, the Queen has had as monarch over 30 of them, averaging around a half corgi a year. And this is considerably less than, say, Deng Xiaoping, who, according to Gareth Evans, had 3 puppies a day. But it's a slightly different approach. You'll be interested to know that the Queen got her first corgi, Susan, when she was 18 as a present from her father, and nearly all of the current corgis are descendant from Susan. She currently has 4 or 5 corgis at any one time. She also has a small brace of corgi dachshund crosses known as doggies. It's true. As well as the United Kingdom, the Windsors were also monarchs of Ireland until 1949 or 1937, depending on how one interprets the Irish Constitution, India until 1950 and Pakistan until 1956. It seems that they've each taken the advice that the cure for admiring the monarchy is to go and look at it. The Australian head of state is paid for from the British public purse, but interestingly is exempt from paying taxes. Not like Kerry Packer didn't pay taxes by rorting the system, which we all admired and thought was very clever, but through legislation. Arranging not to pay taxes through legislation is extremely clever. In 2007 and 8, the Queen received £40 million from the civil lists. The salary of the monarchy is not a reward for achievement, however. It's in the nature of a warm personal gesture to the Queen by herself. The Crown Estate is one of the largest property owners in the United Kingdom, worth over £7.3 billion. Yet recently the Queen asked the government for a poverty handout to help heat her palaces. Royal aides were told that the £60 million worth of energy-saving grants were actually aimed at families on low incomes, and if the money was given to Buckingham Palace instead of housing associations or hospitals, it could lead to adverse publicity for the Queen and the government. Under the Act of Settlement, the Australian monarch is prohibited from marrying either either from being a Catholic or marrying a Catholic. And this law conflicts with Australian anti-discrimination laws, which also prohibits arrangements under which males have precedence over females. One assumes that being of a different ethnic background is also a problem, with the Queen Mother, who in 1990, upon returning from a European summit, said, "It will never work, you know. It will never work with all those Huns, Wops and Dagos." When her daughter married her nephew, and interestingly her second cousin, Prince Philip, things didn't improve. Prince Philip inquired of a British student in Papua New Guinea, "You didn't manage to get eaten then, did you?" And to a student in China he said, "If you stay here much longer, you'll go home with slitty eyes." And then there was his observation that the electrical equipment with tangled wires in a factory looked as though it was put in by an Indian. It appears that royal racism is intergenerational, with Prince Harry referring to others, not quite as he, as Packy and Raghead. This has since seen these descriptors declassified as offensively racist terms. As you will have gathered, nearly every family of a decent size, with, how shall we put this, overlapping lines of descent, has at least one relative who's a little strange. Maybe it's great Aunt Enid and her collection of carefully mounted cat skeletons, or second cousin Cyril's extensive research library on famous serial killers. This is not much of a problem so long as one doesn't get cornered by them at family reunions. But what happens when the family are hereditary rulers? What tends to follow is a reign of grotesque excess, blood and terror, or at least public displays of stupidity and vacuity. Eventually King Cyril the Horrible or Queen Enid the Loony will leave the throne, and that should be the end of the problem, right? Well, not necessarily. In fact, not even probably. Bad craziness in the ruling line rarely appears in isolated cases. Chances are the whole family line is just as tainted, which means that sooner or later, probably sooner, along will come Queen Enid II and King Cyril III, and the whole mess will start up over again. There are several reasons why the royal families are prone to madness. Reason number one, genetics. That means excessive inbreeding, and you're not getting rid of it unless your society is advanced enough to have genetic engineering to deal with the problem. In which case, why would you still have a hereditary monarchy? Stop living in the dark ages, people, or at least stop marrying within the family. Number two, a family curse. Worse than lousy genes, someone has cursed the royal line. This can be more difficult to deal with because even if you're careful about the inbreeding, the curse doesn't care. It may even spread out to people who marry into the royal line and cause them to go mad as well. It also means that you might not solve the problem just by picking a new family to rule over you. They're just as likely to get the curse as soon as they take power. You could try having a parliamentary system and see how the curse deals with that and hope it doesn't spread to cover them as well. Reason number three, a spiritual imbalance brought about by upsetting the planetary equilibrium. This works just like a curse, but rather than deliberate magic, is the result of unintentional cosmic bad vibes. Number four, like the corgis, the family has just gotten a little too used to being pampered and in power, and each generation has gotten a little more corrupt and decadent until finally everyone has started to notice. Reason number five, we expect the monarchy to be divinely touched and require the royal family to be just a little bit loopy. Number six, The culture itself is so hard on rulers, it means that being a bit loony is just a survival strategy. And number 7, they're just nuts. Anything which isn't covered by the preceding. My philosophical colleague, Professor Lai Tin Wheedle, has theorised on the physical underpinnings of royalty, arguing that the only thing known to go faster than ordinary light is monarchy. He reasoned this because you can't have more than one king, because there is no gap between kings, and when a king dies, the succession passes to the heir instantaneously. His theory has it that the atomic particles kingons and occasionally queenons therefore travel faster than the speed of light and transmit monarchy. Succession sometimes fails, however, if in mid-flight they strike an antiparticle, also known as a republicon. Professor Wheedle's ambitious plans to use his discovery to send messages involving modulating the signal through the careful torturing of a small king was never fully expanded, because at that point the bar closed. So yes, we're still a monarchy, but it's not my fault.